evening, and thank you all for coming. My name is Kelly Carroll, and I am the chair of Bennington's Community Policing Advisory Review Board. And next to me is Kate Cost.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. I want to introduce our board members. If you could stand, just so that folks could see you and identify you. So there's Scott Richmond, Scott Frost, Lindsay Brillen, and Vicki Lampron. Jeff Vickers is also a member of our board, but he's unable to attend tonight.
So thank you. You should all have a pamphlet with the agenda inside. And first of all, we'd like to start by thanking everyone for coming. We'd like to thank all of our panelists, and we'd like to thank the Bennington Fire Department for letting us use this space tonight. So the purpose of the forum this evening is to educate and inform the community on current best practices, opportunities, and challenges in safe and legal crime prevention and law enforcement. Each panelist will discuss their agency's role in the community, and this will be followed by an educational discussion on the following: factors and prevention strategies impacting community violence. We're going to discuss the decrease in local violent crime rates, why offenders of serious crime are often released without any jail or prison time, and citizen involvement and the risks of vigilantism. We hope that this discussion will improve your understanding on the role of CPARB in educating and informing the community on current best practices and opportunities and challenges in safe and legal crime prevention and law enforcement. We'll start tonight with an introduction of our panelists with the bios. When they do discuss their agency's role, we've asked them to keep that to about a minute. After we go through the introduction, we're going to discuss the safety issues. We're going to spend about 10 minutes on each of the topics, and then after that, we'll go into questions. We ask that you respectfully hold your questions until that time. And if you are watching online, you are able to submit your questions through CPARB's town website. However, we will not be able to answer that tonight, but we will do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible. We'll start the bios. Would you like to?
Sure.
I'll start with the first one.
Lieutenant Stephen Coote, he's a Vermont native who has served with VPS, Vermont State Police, for over 20 years. Lieutenant Coote started his career in 2005 as a trooper, assigned to the Rutland Barracks, primarily to the Castleton Outpost. In 2013, he was promoted to sergeant and transferred to the training division in Pittsford as a training coordinator. In 2016, he transferred to the New Haven Barracks and filled the role of Sergeant Patrol Commander for a day shift until 2017, when he transferred to the Rutland Barracks to serve in the same role. In December 2017, Lieutenant Coote was promoted to lieutenant and returned to the training division as Director of Recruiting and Training for VPS, where he served until October 2021. In October 2021, he transferred to the Shaftesbury Barracks to assume the station commander responsibility, a role he continues to serve today. During his 20-year career, Lieutenant Coote has been an instructor in many disciplines, including use of force, firearms, leadership, and domestic violence investigations. He has served as an adjunct instructor for the Vermont Police Academy for 13 years. He lives in Pittsford with his wife of 13 years and their dog, Maya.
Next on our panel, we have Paul Doucette Jr., who began his law enforcement career with the Bennington Police Department in January of 1990. After completing the Vermont Police Academy, he was assigned as a patrol officer within the department. Subsequently, he was promoted to the rank of corporal and was assigned as a patrol supervisor. He was then promoted to the rank of sergeant, where he was assigned to the Bureau of Criminal Investigation as a detective sergeant. He was a supervisor of the division and handled a criminal investigation caseload as well. He was promoted to the rank of lieutenant, second in command of the police department, and managed the patrol division. During this time, he also managed grants, was responsible for training, and the department became involved with the Vermont Highway Safety Program. In 2010, Paul Doucette Jr. was promoted to the Chief of Police and Public Safety Director for the town of Bennington. He plans, directs, manages, and oversees the activities of the Bennington Police Department, including law enforcement, criminal investigations, crime prevention, communications, animal control, and emergency management. He also works with the Chief of the Bennington Fire Department and assistants to manage and oversee activities of the fire department. Chief Doucette attended Southern Vermont College and earned a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice with a minor in private security management. He is a graduate of the FBI National Academy 223rd session and also earned the FBI LEDA Trilogy Award. Chief Doucette has earned numerous awards and recognition throughout his career with the Bennington Police Department.
Stuart Hurd, who we all affectionately call Stu, is a graduate, 1970 graduate of Worcester Polytechnic Institute with a degree in urban planning. He was employed by the town of Bennington in February '73 as its first full-time zoning administrator. He also has served as building inspector for a short time and was the zoning and planning administrator until 1982, when he was promoted to assistant town manager. In September '92, Mr. Hurd was appointed to the select board, by the select board to town manager, and will have served in that position for 33 years as of tonight.
Next, we have Erica Marthage, Bennington County State's Attorney. Erica grew up and currently lives in the Manchester area, where she enjoys spending time outdoors with her family. Ms. Marthage attended the University of Vermont and the University of Connecticut School of Law. Upon graduating, she returned to Vermont and started her career as a deputy state's attorney in Bennington County in 2001. In 2006, she successfully ran for and was elected to the office of Bennington County State's Attorney and has served since 2007. State's Attorney Marthage serves as the chair of the State's Attorney Executive Board and focuses on issues surrounding animal abuse and neglect, child protective matters, care of the elderly, and mental health as it intersects with public safety. The Office of the Bennington County State's Attorney is responsible for all criminal prosecutions, child protective matters, mental health as it intersects with public safety, public guardianship, and advocating for victims of crime.
Dr. Elia Reeve has been serving as medical director at United Counseling Services since 2015 and is responsible for overseeing clinical psychiatric services and providing guidance to clinical staff. The medical director assures that agency patients receive appropriate evaluation, diagnosis, treatment, medical screening, and medical or psychiatric evaluation. In addition, the medical director is the liaison for UCS with community physicians, hospital staff, and other professionals and agencies associated with psychiatric services. Dr. Reeve earned her MPH at the University of New Mexico and served in multiple professional academic roles at the University of New Mexico's Department of Psychiatry, Neurology, and Pediatrics. She earned her MD from the University of Connecticut School of Medicine with residencies in psychiatry at the Dartmouth School of Medicine and the University of Connecticut School of Medicine. She also has, just because we want you to be full of lots of information and gifted in all kinds of things. She also has a BA in French and zoology from Connecticut College, so very well-rounded in that sense. She has spent
Merci
time
beaucoup et bonsoir tout le monde.
Oh, pardon me? She has spent time as the register in the epilepsy unit at the Institute of Psychiatry and I'm not sure I'm going to say this right, Maudsley?
Maudsley Hospital.
Maudsley Hospital in London, UK, and was a fellow in the Clinical Brain Disorders Branch at the National Institute of Mental Health in Washington, D.C. Welcome to you all. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. And thank you. And this is what we hope will be the first in a series of public safety forums that CPARB will do, hopefully with the next one involving some, perhaps with the sentencing side where we can get maybe judiciary, the Defender General, the Public Defender's Office, Center for Restorative Justice, Turning Point, and some others. So our hope is this is only the beginning. So thank you again, and I would like to just start with Lieutenant Coote, if you could just take a moment and briefly explain your agency's role in public safety, and then we'll just go right down through the panel.
Thank you. My name is Steve Coote, currently the station commander in Shaftesbury, as you heard. Vermont State Police, primarily the Shaftesbury Barracks, is responsible for law enforcement duties in towns that don't have law enforcement agencies assigned to them, both in Bennington County, and we actually cover a town in Windham County. Our barracks is currently stationed in Shaftesbury. We focus, obviously, on calls to service ranging from criminal violations, support to other agencies to include PDs in the area, and we have a fairly robust special team units within our agency to include major crime unit for homicides or police-involved shootings, search and rescue, and the list goes on. I do enjoy being able to connect with folks that we serve, but also the work that I've been able to do with some of the panel members up here is part of what our agency strives to do, and I appreciate that. So thank you for having me today.
Good evening, everyone. As introduced, my name is Paul Doucette. I am the Chief of Police and Public Safety Director with the Town of Bennington. Our primary responsibilities are the Town of Bennington, the Village of Old Bennington, and North Bennington as well. We are a municipal law enforcement agency. We do have authority. All of our people are Level 3 certified officers, and we do have authority throughout the entire state of Vermont. We do occasionally find ourselves in some of the communities that Lieutenant Coote covers, providing assistance to those communities at the request of the Vermont State Police and or the Bennington County Sheriff's Department, because if we are not working together, we are not going to solve the problems that we currently face in Vermont. Primarily, we do respond to many calls for service in Bennington. Last year was over 13,000 calls for service. In our community, we arrested almost 1,100 people within Vermont. Obviously, not all of those people from Bennington. And we are a very busy law enforcement agency, the Bennington Police Department. And probably when we take the stats of other agencies in Bennington County and add them together, we are by far the busiest agency, and we do appreciate the support from the Vermont State Police, the Sheriff's Department, as well as our federal partners, because again, we can't do this alone. Stu?
Thank you, Paul. Yes, I'm Stuart Hurd. I've been town manager, as it indicated, for now 33 years. I've been employed by the town of Bennington for more than 52 years. I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing, but it is as it is. I should say, Kate, that the people of Worcester, Mass. would be very, very upset with Worcester, but nonetheless, yes, I'm a graduate of WPI a long time ago, perhaps in a galaxy far, far away. My role really is to provide the assistance financially and otherwise to the Bennington Police Department to ensure that they really have the finances necessary, one, to hire and maintain good officers, to provide training to those officers that is adequate to meet the needs that we find in our community today, and to be there essentially for the chief and for the lieutenant when they need a sounding board that is more of a civilian nature and not necessarily a police officer. I am their employer, which means that I get to hire the chief of police, but Paul and I have worked together very well over the years. I find that we have developed a excellent police department, and I'm very proud of that fact, and I will continue to do what I can do to support them as long as I hold this position. Thank you. Erica.
Hi, I'm Erica Marthage. I'm the Bennington County State's Attorney. So we are the chief law enforcement prosecutor for the county. We handle all of the criminal prosecutions, actually probably 99.9% of them, for all of the agencies in the county. So that's the Bennington Police Department, the State Police, Winhall Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, the Manchester Police Department. We have, right now, I have 5 deputy prosecutors. We filed almost 1,900 cases last year. Right now, that puts us at about the 6th largest number of cases in the state, but we have an exceptionally high clearance rate. We have the 2nd most homicides pending right now, which I think is one of the things we have previously discussed. That there was a fair number of significant violence-related crimes, and so my office does all of those, but then we do all of the stuff on the other end of the spectrum. We do all of the child protective work, all of the guardianships for individuals with developmental disabilities, and then we handle all of the appellate and post-conviction relief work. Bennington County has always been a tough county for our response to crime has always been, always before me, started before me. We've always had an immediate and pretty clear response to crime, as evidenced by the decline we've had recently and all the hard work with a lot of the people that are here. So I think this will be a good opportunity for folks to hear more. I would suggest, when you were mentioning all of the agencies, you really should have legislators here, because as we get into the discussion, that's going to be my main frustration. It's not the people that are doing the work, it's the people writing the laws.
That's a good point. Thank you, Erica. As mentioned, I'm Alia Reeve. I represent United Counseling Service here tonight, which is an organization that's not-for-profit and designated by the State Department of Health and Mental Health to provide services, mental health services, to people in Bennington County throughout the age span. We have early childhood Head Start services, adult services, children's services, elder services, mental health and substance use. We work closely with Turning Point, intellectual and developmental disabilities. We provide crisis emergency services and mobile crisis services. We have people embedded in both the Vermont State Police Barracks as well as Bennington Police Department. And we do that through a number of modalities, through therapeutic residences, through outpatient services, through consultations at the hospital, through medication management and diagnosis, and a lot of training as well. Basically, our motto is to build a stronger community, and we try to bring mental health in every aspect possible to do that. We have collaborated extensively with all of you here, except perhaps Mr. Hurd so much, being more administrative, but it's been very, very active and productive. In the 10 years that I've lived here in Bennington, it's really changed.
Thank you, and that's going to bring us right into our discussion of safety issues. And just a reminder, we are going to spend about 10 minutes on each topic, and we do ask that people save their questions for after. We're hoping if we stay on schedule, we should have about an hour for questions, or I'm sorry, a half hour for questions. We have an hour for the discussion and then about a half hour for questions.
And I
So-
forgot to
oh,
mention, there's a brochure and a frequently asked questions in the back on the table if you want to take with you.
So the first topic that we're going to talk about is factors and prevention strategies impacting community violence. And Dr. Reeve, you had just spoken a lot about some of the mental health and some of the different things that UCS is doing. So why don't you start us off with the discussion on this topic?
I will try to keep myself contained because we could go on for a long time, and I would like everybody else to weigh in. But I would say that we've noticed that after COVID-19 acute pandemic measures ended, we've seen a huge increase in anxiety and depression and people who are struggling. So that's across the population. It's particularly evident in children and having difficulties in school settings, but it's also evident in adults and the things that they do to try to cope with anxiety and difficulties in maintaining good interpersonal relationships. That has spurred the interest and support through the state of embedding clinicians with police departments in order to go out on calls together. This is not asking our clinicians to be police officers in any way. They're bringing their mental health expertise to support the police officers and to help the people who are being responded to decompress the situation and find ways to have better dialogue and often identify the mental health dysfunction that is causing the situation to escalate, to tempers to flare, for people to become more rigid in their responses and threatening violence, and to bring it down to what is their real fear, what do they really need. Not to go to jail, not to have a charge, but to have access to services and start linking them and realizing that it is possible. Change is possible, but it's, as we all know, very, very difficult. And it's an important thing to promote that it is possible, that we keep children safe, that we keep adults safe from hurting children, but we keep adults safe from hurting each other. And we have to look at the effects of substance use in that. We have several people with intellectual disabilities of a mild degree that have gotten into serious legal trouble because of, at times, and Ms. Marthage has participated with us in trying to evaluate and keep people safe, but we've had cases where people have been excessively violent and we did not have a means to curtail that until a violent crime was committed. And I would argue that we would be better off if we could stop before the violence was happened and before the death happened, in order to not label people, but to provide the supports they need to function safely with others.
Yeah. And I would definitely agree with that. So maybe we can talk with Lieutenant Coote or Chief Doucette about some of the community violence factors and impacts. I know situation table, Ben stats, and or factors that you think.
Sure. So I will share with you that a lot of people in this room probably came here tonight thinking that this was all going to be about drugs and guns, and it's really not. We do have our issues with drugs. We have our issues with violent crimes that involve not just firearms, but knives and other related weapons. But some of the issues that we do see that are prevalent in our county, not just in Bennington, but throughout the county, is domestic violence. And, we need to keep that in mind, that we're not just looking at drugs and guns. We have lots of issues with domestic violence. We talk about people with mental health issues. Dr. Reeve is 100% correct, obviously. But we look at this and we say there's lots of people with substance abuse issues, not just drugs. Alcohol is a huge factor. We seem to forget alcohol is legal. If you're 21, you can go and purchase alcohol, whether it's at a big box store or a little convenience store or what have you. But alcoholism is prevalent within our county and within our state. And those are situations that we as law enforcement officers deal with on a regular basis. And when you are involved in a domestic violence situation, that can turn very violent. That your spouse, your partner, broken bones, concussions, broken arm, broken leg, prevention from emergency services, those are all things that we see as well. And I thought tonight it would be important to share that with all of you, because what makes it into the media is not always the reality of what is going on in our community and around the state of Vermont. We only hear about the exciting things, and that's not a dig in our media. It's just that's what gets clicks, and that's what sells papers or gets people to watch the news stations. So as we go through this tonight, I would just ask all of you to sit back and think just for a minute about someone that you may know, a family member, a friend, who's been involved in domestic violence, or who's had a substance abuse issue that doesn't involve an opiate or another regulated drug. I mean, alcoholism, again, is an issue. So where are we at? Years ago, we didn't all work together. I mean, State Police, Bennington Police, the Sheriff's Department, of course, we all worked together. But we weren't out there so much with the United Counseling Service. We work very well with the State's Attorney's Office. We have inside lines, we can make connections, we can do all the things that we need to do. But we realized that we, as law enforcement, were failing, because someone with mental health issues, as Dr. Reeve has already said, doesn't need to go to jail. We need to get them some help. So we've established other programs, and we have a pre-charge program where we don't necessarily have to arrest somebody. I gave you a pretty high number before. Those are people that we arrest. That doesn't include the people that we pre-charge and that get to go to diversion and get to do counseling or community service and realize what they've done wrong. There's a lot of other factors that go on within our community and within law enforcement where we try to get to people before they go too far down the path of no return. So again, as we think about that tonight, we engaged in Project Alliance. Lorna Matern is here tonight. Love her, and the fact that she was willing to step up with UCS and start making things happen. It was a huge project. We had huge meetings over at Bennington College with lots of partners and lots of people that wanted to get involved. We didn't really do that before. Right? We have BenStat. Lieutenant Grandy is a whiz-bang at generating stats with our partners that are involved in BenStat, so that we can get out there and get people the help that they need, whether it's through UCS, through Southwest Vermont Medical Center, or other types of programs that are available to us, instead of just saying, that's it, you're under arrest, and let's send them to Erica to see what she can do. That's the old school way of doing things. And then we have the situation table. I'm not completely sold on the situation table at this point. We're still working that between Project Alliance and BenStat. The situation table is just another program for us, and we're trying to make that work here in Bennington, but it's a lot of work that a lot of people don't know a lot about. And we're really trying to get people to understand. The situation table is up and running in a couple of other communities in Vermont. Is it effective? I think it's effective, but it's a slow process. Project Alliance took right off. BenStat took right off. Situation table, we're a little slow to get started. We've had lots of training. There are people in this room that have been to situation table training. Lieutenant Coote and I were there as law enforcement. I won't speak for others. Lieutenant Grandy was there because he's another law enforcement officer in the room. And we're looking at this and we're like, we can make a difference when we all work together. But the person or the people that we're trying to help have to want that help. And that's what you all need to understand. It's that old saying my father used to say, oh, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I don't even know what that meant really back then. But the bottom line is that we want to help people, whether it's through Turning Point or other GBICs or other programs, the UU. There's a lot of people that want to get involved and want to help. But again, people have to want that help. And they have to do things to help themselves. So please keep that in mind when you get frustrated with the police or the prosecutor or what's UCS doing to help. I mean, I don't want to go down the road too far, but UCS is amazing. The hospital staff is amazing. And working together with all of these people has really opened up the eyes of law enforcement. And we're fortunate that we're here in the southern part of the state and we have so many partners that want to help. I'll stop now.
Okay. Lieutenant Coote, would you like to add anything to that?
I don't know how I follow that up. I think Paul hit a lot of good stuff. I just want to share in terms of the collaboration piece for the law enforcement. Being in law enforcement for 20 years, I remember coming out of the academy with what I call just by fastball. We show up because someone calls us a problem, and we determine if there's criminal violation, arrestable offense, ticketable offense, and we move on to the next problem. That was how law enforcement worked. What we're realizing now is there's a lot of complex problems with some of the folks that we're dealing with, whether it's substance abuse, homelessness, financial, and what this collaboration's allowed us. And we keep highlighting UCS, but it's probably the wheelhouse for me with 2 embedded workers in our barracks now. It's been able for my troopers to be able to go and not have to be the person doing all the talking, because as you can imagine, when someone dressed like us walks into a room, that can be fairly anxiety building for folks, especially folks in crisis or dealing with issues about worried about getting arrested. They may not be willing to talk about what the real problem is so that we can point them to resources. And conversely, what this has allowed us is having these partnerships with other agencies inside of Bennington County and statewide, because this is happening at all the barracks in the state, and I'll kind of speak on the state police side. It's teaching our troopers what those resources are, because as law enforcement has progressed, as our society's progressed, there's been avenues to refer these folks to hopefully become more preventative rather than just reactive, which is a lot of law enforcement. We're reacting to a problem. We're able to forecast things, partner with folks from different agencies within Bennington County and statewide to possibly refer those folks to services rather than putting them in handcuffs and dragging them to jail, because we all know that's not necessarily the only answer. So that's been a huge asset for us here. It also, for me as a station commander, it's teaching my troopers a little bit more about how to interact and diffuse some situations. They get good training in the academy, but when you have folks from UCS who have some pretty high-level schooling in this, they're learning from that, and they're utilizing those skills when they're interacting with folks at calls, on traffic stops. It's really opened some avenues for us to get our job done better. And quite honestly, sometimes not even go. And it sounds terrible. They say this Vermont State Police aren't going to a call, but let's be honest, there are certain things that we shouldn't be going to. And it may be a call from another agency, whether it's Turning Point, whether it's UCS, whether it's DCF, because our presence can change that dynamic. So being able to partner with them and refer them to get these folks the services they need without having law enforcement have to be innately involved when it doesn't need to be has been important.
Both VSP and Bennington Police Department have gotten much better at making a call after they've been called to a situation where it's some bells of alarm are going off that maybe a militaristic type presence in a uniform with potential weapons is not going to help, and they will call and discuss with our clinicians on strategy for how to approach a situation. And that has been the real difference, and I would say just over 18 months that we've seen.
So I'll just add to that very quickly, if you don't mind. Lieutenant Coop brought up the fact about the embedded clinicians. We're very thankful to the state of Vermont, we being the Bennington Police Department. We got our clinician program going with some grant funding. So I just wanted to make sure that you all understood that, the state was great initially and was able to provide us with some funding. This past year, our select board and Mr. Hurd, we were able to work it out so that we could have a part-time clinician, and hopefully I would ask all of you to support our budget, because in that is a full-time clinician that would be embedded into the Bennington Police Department, and it works, folks, 100%. You heard Steve Coote talk about it, and it's not just for people that are in need of services within our community. I will tell you that one of the best things about having an embedded clinician in our office is when we go on a call and bad things happen, whether it's an untimely death or there's some type of significant domestic violence or child abuse case, we go back to the office and we debrief with the embedded clinician, and the officers have an opportunity, our communication staff have an opportunity to meet with the clinician, and then the very next day the clinician comes back and meets with our staff. So really for us, it's twofold. It's getting the help within the community that is much needed, and it's also there to show support for the staff at the Bennington Police Department, and we do take advantage of that as well. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Okay, thank you. Erica, is there anything that you wanted to add for prevention strategies and factors?
Yes.
Please.
I don't want everybody here to think this is just a bowl of cherries and we're all talking about everything behind closed doors and we're problem solving everything. That's not what's happening. We're trying, but there are so many factors involved with whether this is all successful or not. And some of the factors that have changed over time, we've always had the factors that lead to increased crime with unemployment rates and housing insecurity and mental health and substance use and addiction and, all of those things that are present. But then, and this came up at the situation table, then we have an element that is they're less hesitant to use violence, serious violence. And that's something that is new to us in the last 10 years. And so we've had to strategize about how to address that without sweeping everyone that we encounter into that same pool, because that's not everyone is someone that's willing to resort to violence right away. I don't frequently publicly disagree with the chief, but I am going to say domestic violence is very different than DUI fatalities from my perspective. Domestic violence involves a victim that has multiple levels of things going through their head involving their home life, their stability, their children, their finances. Their 80 to 85% of our prosecutions for domestic violence result in either dismissals or acquittals. Some of that is juries they very rarely convict on domestic violence where it is strictly a he said, she said. And that's frustrating beyond belief. Because when you have a victim that comes forward and puts everything on the line and testifies, which is a feat to get there, because it takes a while to get there, and then to have a jury say, no, we don't believe you because nobody was there when you were being beat up, that's frustrating. So it is a very different thing from my perspective. If we're not doing domestic violence cases right from the get-go with the investigation and the support and how we're able to get those to court quickly. This is shocking, but true. Not all domestic violence victims are leaving the person that abused them. So the quicker we can get in and connect with all these other services that allow for them to reunify safely and where everyone is kind of understanding what's happening here. Is it alcohol? Is it poverty? Is it, learned behavior? Whatever it is. My office isn't in the job of just I listed all these numbers, but yeah, we prosecute a lot of cases, but as the chief indicated, I talk to them almost daily. about the cases that they're not sending down for charges. What can we do? Who should we call? Where can we send it? How can we leverage that help? Because it's not super popular, but in my experience, when we have someone that is struggling with significant substance abuse disorder, they're not choosing to go to rehab. They're going because we've been able to leverage it somehow. And maybe that's, I understand there's a whole philosophy that that's wrong and that that doesn't work. But all of the people that I've worked with who have lost adult children to overdose, they do not hesitate a minute when they say, I wish he had been in jail. I wish she had been in jail. Because it is very different than alcohol or even cocaine or the drugs we've been dealing with in the past. This is something where, we are seeing a lot of people. I was on vacation for a week, and I think there were 3 or 4 calls just in the time I was gone about individuals overdosing. Not always dying, but it is something that we're trying to juggle kind of all of these things at once. So I think it's the culmination of things. I think I can't subscribe to the view that mental health does not, people that have significant mental health should not be incarcerated. Sometimes that's the only thing we can do, because again, the legislators have not provided a place for significantly mentally ill, violent individuals to go. In Connecticut, they have public safety boards that actually sit, and they're made up of a group like this, but they include victims and people from the community, and they talk about what kind of risk do we think this person poses to the public? Because at the end of the day, it's really about quality of life for everyone in the community, not just the people that are getting in trouble and ending up in court, and not just the people that have never been in trouble in their lives. But I mean, how many people are just thinking, I just want to go to work and pick my kids up at school and not have a crime happen to me? And it's heartbreaking to see the people that are struggling in the community. So, it's a much more complicated issue. I think all of these multidisciplinary groups that are meeting are certainly working on all of these things, but I think we have a long way to go. Prosecution isn't always the answer, of course not, but we also need to be able to do our jobs. And if I have to listen to one more legislator tell me how they are going to come up with a better way to decide who should go to diversion, we've always had record high numbers of diversion referrals. I'm the one that said, let's do pre-charge. I gave all the forms to all the law enforcement. You're there, you're interacting with these people. You should decide whether I see them or not. Not me. We have a great working relationship with the defense bar. We all talk about, what do you think? Tell me what you think we should do here. What's going to prevent, I don't want to see these people back. The people that I see in the courtroom, the last thing I say to them is, okay, stay away, I don't want to see you back. Please try to stay out of trouble, because it's heartbreaking when you see families generationally just coming back into the courtroom, and sadly I've been around long enough to see generations of people coming back. And, I feel like we need to do that better, but the level of trust in the folks that are trying to work on this problem, you just need to let us do our job. Don't tell me from Montpelier what the people that have elected me every 4 years, I use the example, you can be naked in downtown Brattleboro, you cannot be naked in downtown Bennington. I get phone calls. Even when it happens, ask Paul. I left work, I hadn't made it to the Arlington exit, and I had 10 phone calls and text messages from people in downtown Bennington saying somebody was walking naked from the Salvation Army down to the splash pad. And I'm like, That doesn't happen in Brattleboro. So, it's the community standards that the people in Bennington are really, what is it that we want to see in our community? We want to see people employed. We want to see people that have housing. We don't want to see kids struggling.
So that's a great segue to Stu, since because
Thank
where
you.
you sit is very different from where these other folks sit.
Very
so-
different, and this is very informative for me. Although I give Paul a lot of credit, he does not hold back in our conversations. And from the community perspective, what I've seen over the last several years is youthful offenders committing very violent crimes. They're not necessarily Bennington residents, but they are here as part of the drug trafficking. And from a community perspective, the community is thinking, why are they constantly released? And I'm not going to look for an answer tonight because that's one of the questions that are asked. And
Call your legislator.
All right, thank you very much. And we have talked with our legislators. Paul and I worked very closely with Senator Sears before he passed about a bill that would deal with the age of youthful offenders and how we look at them and violent crime from those who are 16, 17, and 18 years old. I don't know that anything was done with that, and we hear that the legislature now is looking to raise the age of youth to something like 22 or 24 years old. I'm sorry, I find that hard to believe that someone 24 years old doesn't understand when they're committing a crime that they're committing a crime. But nonetheless, those are one of the community issues I see. I love the context of labeling. We tend to do it. I tend to do it. We tend to label people. We put them in a box and we say, we're going to deal with that person in a certain way, and that way may not be the correct way. It may not work. And when Paul talked about social services, we are asking more and more of our police, of our teachers, to deal with the social service issues that they face on a daily basis. And I don't know that as a society that is fair or it's going to be successful. Somehow we need to grasp that there are people out there that really need our help. We need to identify them earlier, and we need to be able to provide programs to help them grow older successfully. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. So next, we're going to discuss the actual decrease in local violent crime rates. Erica, would you like to start that off?
I looked at, I think it's a group of factors. I think part of it is the very strong response we had kind of in the beginning when we were seeing a lot of the offenders that Stu was talking about, and I struggle with the youthful offender thing because I am opposed to what it looks like now. For years, we used youthful offender to help kids that were turning 18 and they didn't have natural supports. And now we're stuck with, as Stu said, we have older kids that are coming here and committing very violent offenses. I think the Bennington Police and State Police, all of the agencies have done a really good job of addressing with a firm hand from the beginning. But I think that goes together with all of the social service stuff Paul is talking about. And it's not just the folks that are criminal court involved or even family court involved. It's, the local social agencies, Brock and, any of the agencies, Turning Point and PAVE and any of the agencies that are helping with all the other pieces, and then you bring all the programs from UCS into it. And just having those people at the same table, I think has really, how I looked at it, the situation table, and I like this analogy, you're just looking at one person. I love the let's put people in a box, but I have yet to meet someone that fits in a box squarely. We always end up talking about the person, and I think that we've done a good job as a community of at least starting to have those conversations, and even if we're addressing 6 people a month, and trying to address their specific needs, that's going to help. And of course, it has a domino effect, right? I think if we can just stay on track with that and not backpedal and start thinking we have solved it, or I think we have to keep the pressure on kind of both ends. I think Jay Johnson said it best, there should be a carrot and a stick. Can't be all carrots.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll add to that. Eric is 100% correct. We talked about earlier not having a place to put people that are suffering from mental health crisis, not enough beds, not enough facilities. We don't have a juvenile detention facility in the state of Vermont anymore. We did away with that through legislation, and that is a big sigh from Erica. And the problem is I'm not saying that we should lock everybody up, but we have juvenile violent offenders that come into our community, 15, 16 years old, carrying Glock ghost guns, lots of crack cocaine, and, what do we do with them? We send them back to where they're from, in a state down below, whether it be Connecticut or Massachusetts or a state to our west, New York. We let them go home with their parents, and we give them conditions of release that say, don't come back to Vermont unless you have court, and they're right back here the next week.
Can I just interject in that too, Paul? But let's not leave out that then we're asking social workers.
Correct.
To take these violent 16-year-olds from the police department, take them in your car and take them someplace, because we don't have anywhere to put them.
Right, and that's a problem for me. It's a problem for me also, and I'm not going to name any programs. The town of Bennington has several youthful offender programs where we house people from out of our area. They get out of these programs, they steal cars, they run away, they cause extra work for the Bennington Police, they cause extra work for the Vermont State Police because of some of the things that they get involved in. This isn't to criticize those programs. Some of these people are there and they need help and they get the help. But a lot of people try to escape, they run away, we have to chase after them. It gets expensive. And we want to help these people. We don't have a juvenile offender location to put people. We were placing people in New Hampshire. That has come to a close. And I have to tell you, I don't want to keep using Erica's line, but you need to speak to your local legislator and let them know that Vermont needs to get back on track. And if we're going to have people coming into Bennington, Shaftesbury, Arlington, slinging dope and having firearms and committing violent acts, then we need a way to hold them accountable for their actions. There is a meeting coming up next week out of this area, and I probably will attend that meeting with Lieutenant Grandy because we want to see how Massachusetts is doing things. And we need to get our legislators to step up. I don't want to hear about the money aspect or the staffing aspect anymore. We are focused on safety, community safety, and that's what we need to look at. And if we need to have a juvenile detention facility back in Vermont, then that's what we need to do. The hospital's stepping up. We're going to have a juvenile psych unit at the hospital here in Bennington. We can't always get beds at Brattleboro Retreat. We can't rely on Brattleboro Retreat all the time, folks. Please, you're here, which means you're interested. Speak to your legislators and let them know. I just went, Lieutenant Coote and I, just went to Montpelier. We had opportunities to speak to the Lieutenant Governor and to Governor Scott himself. They both realize that we need some help, not just in the southern part of the state, all over the state of Vermont, dealing with some of these youthful offenders and what we're going to do with them. If you go back into Governor Scott's press release about a month or so ago, I give that man a lot of credit. He stood up and said, I made a mistake signing this legislation. Go back on YouTube, watch it. He admits it, and we need to make a change. Whether it happens this year in this legislative session, I don't know. A lot of new legislators up north, unknown what they're going to do. But now we have a chance to speak to our legislators and tell them what we need them to do. It shouldn't be what their personal agenda is or the organization that gave them the most money to get elected. It should be what we, their constituents, need. So speak to them, please.
Anyone else want to add?
I want to piggyback on what Erica said about the situation rooms. It's not the volume of cases that get discussed. It's noticing how we can begin to form the safety nets between these different services that are isolated by funding and by regulations that are actually not supporting our juveniles and our adults. They fall between cracks, and it's easier administratively to say, it's not in my camp. Just like this little gap between the two tables, it's falling in there. It's not my responsibility. And instead, it's the attitude of the community to say, no, we're going to pick up the skirt from each table and make it continuous. And that's what we need. And to continue doing that, that builds a will in the community such that it makes it harder and harder for the extreme violence to occur. Silence and withdrawing allows the violence to happen. Refusing to be silent is what is the counterfoil to that.
Yeah.
I wondered if someone could speak to Ben Stat and the work that's done at the individual level to help folks who are sort of seen, I'm not sure how to describe it, whether they're seen or but they're clients of those cases that are discussed, and how that influences the rate of crime, potentially, or the rate of trouble that's out there in the community.
Sure, I'll touch on Ben Stat quickly, and that's I think for a future panel, bringing some of the people in that are involved in Ben Stat. I mean, the Bennington Police Department is obviously heavily involved in Ben Stat, along with our partners, Gina Kondo, who runs corrections here in Bennington. She's part of that. We've seen people come and go. We are looking at data from, for example, Bennington Rescue, the school district, the police department, corrections, and we're looking at, as an example, high users of services. And we come together and we basically brainstorm and we try to figure out what we can best do to get these people help. You know, it doesn't mean that you have to be a person that's highly involved in crime. You might be a high user of services from the Bennington Rescue Squad, so we need to get you to stop calling 911, tying up an ambulance to go to the hospital. There's got to be other means. Can we connect you with services to get you help and to understand your issues so that you're not constantly calling 911, tying that up, and then tying up Bennington Rescue? Are you somebody that's constantly getting picked up with small amounts of drugs? You know, how can we get you help? Are we responding to your home on a regular basis because you and your spouse can't get along and you're committing acts or you're committing domestic issues? You have domestic issues in front of your children. Is there a way that we can get you help? Can the officers, are the officers doing what they should be doing? Are they doing referrals to the PAVE program, through the AIRS program, so that, as Erica said, we can't arrest everybody, right? And we don't arrest everybody because domestic violence is underreported, okay? And as Erica said, if we can't get it to trial right away, people change their mind and they want to be in love again or whatever the situation may be. And I'm not making fun of those people. That's just the circle of domestic violence. That's why we have to rely on programs like PAVE, and we have to do, as law enforcement officers, or if we look at this through Project Alliance and we say, well, Chief Doucette didn't do the AIRS referral program to PAVE, so let's make sure that's getting done and we get services from PAVE. I mean, there's a lot of things that we look at. So we're looking at high users, different types of services, our kids going to school, what do we need to do to help with that situation? So there's a lot that goes on with Project Alliance. It's data-driven. So we get our stats from rescue, from corrections, from the police, SVSU, so on and so forth. And that's what BenStat really is. And we were out ahead of the situation table proposal that we're currently working with now. So now we have 3 programs going, as I said earlier, with Project Alliance, BenStat, and the situation table. But that's really what BenStat is for us. I think it works. We've seen success stories. I mean, we don't have the ability to throw parties for people and things like that. That's not what this is. This is to get you situated and to move you into a situation where you're getting the help that you need. That's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. I mean, I think that it's important that, in terms of BenStat and Project Alliance, situation table, those are all helping to prevent violent crime. And, I mean, because you keep a lid on it, you get folks the services that they need. Eric, do you want to
Well,
say?
and even outside of the actual situation table or Project Alliance or BenStat organization, the things that we talk about as various agencies frequently after hours, in Bennington County, they made it law 5-6 years ago that you have to call a state's attorney if a police officer responds to an act of domestic violence. That's been the case here since I took office, because it's always going to be a conversation, and sometimes, like if it's a parent-child thing, well, are there grandparents around, are there grandparents, or is there an uncle or someone that can take, the child, or where the parent can go, or we're constantly, those are the things we're problem-solving at night. And on the weekends, I have no issue with calling Gina or calling, the district director of DCF, we speak all the time. It's the folks, I don't want to say just Montpelier, because some of them are in Waterbury, but the people in the centralized agencies, I think Lauren has been at some of these meetings where I said, okay, Commissioner so-and-so of mental health, can I have your cell phone number? You're telling me that you have all the answers to all this stuff, but why can't I reach you at 11:30 on a Friday night when it's actually all hitting the fan? Because that's when it happens. It's not during business hours during our meeting. It's after hours. It's on the weekend in the middle of the night. The situation is hot, and we're just trying to figure out how to keep everyone safe. It's not above me to be and Paul knows, is this guy's mother around? Because I will talk to their parent, the grandmother, I don't care who it is, give me a phone number, I'm calling somebody that can maybe give us some insight about how to help this situation to defuse whatever it is happening, so that we can just get to a time when we can rationally think about what to do to make sure everyone's safe.
Could somebody please tell us who are, forgive me for interrupting, you talked about BenStat, you talked about Project Alliance, you talked about, what are they?
So, briefly, Project Alliance is a group of organizations that got together from the governor's office at a directive in 23, I think it was 2022, 23, and they all got together and it started collaborating. Different organizations, law enforcement agencies, and then you have BenStats, which is Bennington Statistics, and that is where some of those groups got together to look at individual people where there were frequent calls, and there's a lot of HIPAA with that. And then you have the situation table, which is similar to Bennington Statistics, BenStats, except that situation table is more county-wide as opposed to just Bennington. So I don't want to, I'm sorry, we want to try to keep on task for that. And I apologize for any confusion, and we can certainly talk after.
Is that helpful? Does that make sense?
A little bit helpful, but, for those of us who aren't doing this, hearing members of the panel talk about these,
Okay.
I mean, how are they different? I mean, but
That's another story.
That's another panel, so, okay.
Thank you.
It's more multidisciplinary meetings, like we've all had, you had your whole career, all the multidisciplinary meetings with all the agencies at the table. And, I think it would be nice when you have that panel to maybe talk about, hey, is there a way to put all this information or all these meetings in one? Because as the people who attend these meetings, it seems like we're missing something when we're having all these different meetings that are really discussing a lot of the same things.
And I just want to add, just so you have a little bit better understanding, with the situation table, when we come together for a situation table, we identify the people at the table that need to be part of that discussion. Everyone else gets up and leaves. Because we talk about a lot of things that are very personal, and are confidential. And so if there's not a need for a certain organization to be at that situation table, then they're dismissed and we continue on. Does that help?
So let's move on to the third topic, which is, because it's connected to all of this, is why offenders of serious crime are often released without any jail or prison time. And while this is definitely a legal issue, it certainly impacts the community. And so I wondered, Mr. Hurd, if you could start us off. I know that this is sort of out of the wheelhouse, and yet as someone who observes the community, who works with so many players in the community, if you could bring it to that level, and then we can always delve deeper.
Thank you. I mean, it's difficult for me to be the lead on this because I know what these folks are all trying to do to deal with that particular issue. And it comes down, I think, to the perception that law enforcement is not doing enough to ensure that these offenders are being held accountable. And I speak from those folks who come to talk to me about it, and I understand that we don't have the facilities in this state any longer to deal with a number of these issues. Youthful offenders is the key. They are the most often released, as the chief has said, as Erica has said. They're sent back home with their parents, and they turn around and they come right back because they're working with a gang or with an affiliation that understands that they will not be held accountable for their crimes, and therefore they're the ones they send in to deal with the market of substances that the community has. And I was thought when we were talking about decrease in local crime rates, it would be wonderful if we could reduce the market. Because if you can reduce the market, you reduce the crime. And that goes beyond law enforcement, because that's really not law enforcement's issue. That's an issue for society. We have to figure out how we get out of this substance abuse and substance use disorders that are prevalent throughout our community. And it runs the gamut from the wealthy to those who live in poverty. And we need to find a way to address that. That goes beyond what we're talking about here. But all I can say is that it appears that we don't have a place, that we don't have a way to deal with those offenders who commit the crimes that aren't terribly serious, but they're serious enough. And we don't have a place for them. We don't have a place to hold them. And that's a community vision, perhaps not a law enforcement vision. And I'll turn to the law enforcement people to deal with that.
I think it's important that we all realize, too, we get frustrated with people that get arrested. We call it the catch and release program, like fishing. And we apprehend these people. They go to court. I've listened to Erica and her staff argue for bail. You have to remember that bail cannot be used as a punishment People in this country are afforded that protection under the U.S. Constitution, and we cannot just simply hold people and set their bail extremely high. Some of the people that we deal with are first-time or low-level offenders, and we just can't hold them. And we all in this community and other communities throughout Vermont, we get frustrated. It's no different than the state of New York. They've gone completely bonkers over there with just letting everyone go. We're experiencing the same thing here. However, in all fairness, to the judges that are currently sitting in Bennington County, we are seeing a change, and people are being held with bail or stricter release conditions. I think that people like yourselves are being heard, and we're actually making some progress in that area, and people are being held on bail. And so, this isn't a, stay tuned, let's see what happens, because I know we all, including law enforcement, want to see action now. But again, when you have somebody that doesn't have a criminal record, it's very difficult to hold them, and they get released on their own recognizance, or they get released to a grandparent, or they get released to a family member outside of state, and we think that they're going there, and the next thing you know, they're right back in the area. And it's very difficult to apprehend people for release condition violations, because you actually have to go and look for that when there's so many other things going on. And I think it's important that we realize it's not out of our prosecutor's office, it's not the state police or the sheriffs or any other municipal. It's up to our judges, and they get their direction from our legislators without a doubt. And so I just wanted to share my piece on that, Erica or Steve.
Yeah, I can tell you my matrix for what I do when I have cases come in. I'm not asking for first-time offenders, low-level offenses. I'm not asking for bail on those people that come in and don't have a record and haven't committed a violent offense. I am asking for it on felonies that involve violence. I'm asking for bail on individuals that have 10, 20, 30 offenses pending. I'm asking for bail on folks that have a domestic assault case where they repeatedly violate their conditions by contacting their victim or harassing their victim. The problem is the legislature has changed the bail statute a number of times over the last 6 or 7 years. First, putting a $200 cap on any offense that is eligible for expungement, which is another whole can of worms, but that really prevents me from asking for bail on, say, for example, someone that is a serial shoplifter. Or a good example, when we had, a lot of you remember when we had the cars being broken into. 100 cars were broken into. I could not get bail to save my life because each offense is only a misdemeanor. So this all started changing 6 or 8 years ago when they started, I feel like it really started to become governing by philosophy, and as Paul said, not governing by what the people that your constituents have elected you to do and what your concerns as a community are. So when I have, things have definitely, the tide has turned a little bit with, we have a new judge they do judicial rotation every year. The judges change. We had a spate of time where we had the same judges in court in Bennington, and they were not putting bail on people. On every felony crime of violence, I ask for it, every one, because I want them to make the decision to release this person. And I had a judge many years ago say, it must be nice being you because you're always either right or you're pleasantly surprised. And that's absolutely true. They're either going to show up to court and not commit another offense, or they're going to commit another offense, or they're going to abscond. I don't think it's an accident that the backlog everybody's talking about and trying to say that has to do solely with COVID. I would beg to differ. I think we just had a pretrial today with 100 cases on. 40% of the people didn't show up. And well, what do I get I get a $200 arrest warrant that then I have to send law enforcement a list a mile long and say, all these people didn't show up to court today. Because there's no consequence to not showing up. Because there's a $200 warrant, but then if they just waltz into court whenever they feel like it, I have to drop everything I'm doing and run over there to do their arraignment or do their appearance to make sure that, because they don't have the $200, we don't want them to go to jail. I'm not saying everybody with low-level bail should go to jail. What I'm saying is, what happened to the accountability that we had 10 years ago? Well, I have cases now with people, 40, 50 misdemeanors pending all at once, and they're not having any consequences for years sometimes. So that's a big struggle. I have a sentencing tomorrow where I'm looking for jail time. It's a DUI fatal accident. I have the attorney on the other side saying this person shouldn't get any jail. Well, I've been doing this a long time, and I've looked at all of the state records, and people get jail time when you kill someone in a DUI accident. Even if you're the greatest person in the world, it was a total accident, it was a one-off, the only time you've ever been drunk driving. It doesn't matter. Someone died. And there's a piece of the community that wants an atonement for that. And so the idea that, and I'm a moderate, but, I'm not necessarily seen that way in the legislature now. It's very anti-jail, anti-bail. It makes it very difficult to do our jobs. The state's attorney in Windham County retired this past year because she literally wrote a long letter to the newspaper and said, I just can't do it anymore. She'd been doing it almost as long as me, and she said, I can't do it anymore. It's constantly going in and banging your head against the wall every day. I wish I had a quarter of the authority people think I have. I just walk in and, whatever the law is and whatever the judge says, that's how it is.
Stephen, did you want to say something?
No, I won't take up too much time, but I will say a lot of what you've already heard. Law enforcement is painted in some cases as, I can't believe these folks are back out. We have a strict guideline of what we can and can't do. We refer to the state's attorney's office and collaborate with them, and then it's out of our hands. I can assure you, as a citizen of Vermont, a native Vermonter, I am frustrated with it too, because the troopers I supervise, arresting the same person over and over again is equally as frustrating for us as it is for the members of our community. So I hope you realize that some of that process is outside of our control, and we are governed a lot about what's in statute and legislative mandates. So that's what I'll just add to that.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is discussion on citizen involvement and the risk of vigilantism. And just to give a little background, in November, the Select Board had a listening session, and we had a resident who had spoken at length about the dangers of drug gangs and some citizens that she had witnessed that were taking the law into their own hands. So that's actually how we came about to have the forum tonight. So is there anybody that wants to start talking about citizen involvement, the risk of vigilantism, see something, say something safely?
So I will share with you that we do have a program, See Something, Say Something. We, along with the state police, also have a tip line on our website. We share information. If we receive information through our website that involves the state police, the sheriff's department, Manchester, Winhall, New York State Police, we share our our information, and we're glad to do that. The Vermont State Police have a tip line. They also share their information with us, especially if it involves activity going on in and around Bennington. So that is the preferred way of doing things. We also have a telephone number that you can call, and you can leave a message. That message is translated and then sent in an email format to the detective sergeant at the Bennington Police Department. So that is certainly the preferred way of doing things. Yes, we do have people that like to get out into our community and have been helpful to us in solving some crimes, but sometimes those people place themselves in situations which can be dangerous, and then they call for help. You know, wheeling around the corner up on two wheels, driving recklessly, thinking that you're helping the police, running stop signs, going through red lights, pulling up and taking an AR-15 out of your vehicle and pointing it at someone is not the way to help the police or any other type of firearm, because when we roll up, we may not recognize you as someone that we know, and when you're told to drop the weapon and you don't, sometimes people get hurt, and we want to avoid all of that. So carrying firearms and driving recklessly, that is not acceptable. We do appreciate the help of the community, and we encourage people to give us information, but we also encourage people not to get involved and not to confront people that are involved in illegal activity. You know, you can call 911, you can call the 802-442-1030 number, you can call 802-442-5421. I always get the UCS and the state police mixed up. They're so close. And sometimes it's the same now. It's the same. It's the same. They have two clinicians. So, you know, with that being said, that's my high horse. Again, we appreciate the support from the community. We encourage it, but we ask that you be appropriate in your response and let us know what's going on, because we don't want people getting hurt. That's what I have to say on that. Erica?
Well, I just would say you don't have immunity, so I don't know why you would be running stop signs. I haven't heard about this, but that would be my first thing, or pulling out any kind of firearm. But I mean, it's the same reason I don't ride along with the police, right? Like, I'm going to be ultimately prosecuting the case, but I'm not riding shotgun with them, like, to all these scenes. I'm not trained, and neither is, you know, a person in the community. I do greatly appreciate the tips and the information that are provided, mainly because, and this probably isn't a shock, but when I have cases that involve drug activity or fights, or, you know, my witnesses sometimes are other defendants. So then I get to a trial and I have a very difficult time, because I don't have an outside perspective of what just happened. I have just the people that were involved. So any of that information that's provided, even if nobody wants to give their name, it's still, I would prefer a name, but even if you don't, it certainly helps the detectives come figure out where to go and what leads to follow. And, you know, if we're wrong about something, I want to know that too. Like, you know, if we don't have the right person. I have actually had that happen a couple of times over the years. And again, it is being pleasantly surprised when I can say, wow, you were right. You didn't do this. And we can dismiss it.
Anya, I wondered if you could speak to how this exacerbates.
Well, there are a couple of things I was going to add. One of it is from a neuropsychiatric and neurodevelopmental perspective. One of the problems of people getting angry and responding and impulsive and responding that, Paul, you're referring to, is the lack of awareness in that situation and going too far, too quickly, and being not under control. One of the differences of relying on trained officers is that they hopefully have successfully been trained to be operating under stressful situation with multiple inputs. And not most of us are trained that way, and we will not see the whole picture, don't know how to make use, and it makes it less safe not only for ourselves, but also for the people that we're concerned about who are breaking that particular law or that action. So it is better and wiser to to invoke more people. Another piece of that is that there is a very, very small percentage who imagine things going on. They also use that reporting line. They are working out of a mental illness perception with a distortion of reality. And our phone lines and your phone lines get clogged with those calls. So we have to differentiate the reality-based call from the paranoid call in which people are imagining that they are unsafe. And that is also a job for the professionals to try to sort out. And a different kind of help is needed. The problem is many people with mental illness are witnessing things and are scared to speak up, and we wish that they would speak up more often because they are in places where they do see things happen, and they can be very reliable witnesses, even if they have a distortion in reality as their primary mental health illness. So you do need those witnesses, and being totally anonymous or explaining why you're scared to reveal your name is also important, because it may be a way that they can help protect your identity so that you are safe, but that the accuracy of the report is conveyed.
Can I just jump in for a second? Just from an administrative perspective, I'm the citizen here that doesn't deal with these things on a daily basis, but I think when there's citizen involvement and there's vigilanteism, there's not a slash between the two. And I think in Bennington, we do have a group of people who are putting themselves at risk for whatever reason, whether it's to bolster their own strength and ideals or whatever. But those people concern me because I feel that at some point in time, they will get hurt or they will hurt someone unnecessarily. So when we talk about citizen involvement, see something, say something, that is what we should be focusing on. And to the extent that we can as a community, we should not be looking at vigilantes as some sort of hero to be proud of, because I think it's a very, very dangerous road.
Thank you. That ends our discussion of the safety issues, and we're now going into the question and answer. So is there anyone from if you can just come up to the front, state your name and town of residence, and then your question, please.
My name is Charlie Jingo. I live here in Bennington. And I wanted to ask the three law enforcement folks, are you fully staffed? And where does that stand for each of you? How many could you have as if you were fully staffed? How many do you have as your staff?
I guess I'm on the end, so I'll start. So I'll speak kind of just to Shaftesbury specifically. You know, agency-wide, we are down a significant amount of troopers. We're down about 50 statewide, the last number of a force that's about 330 at full capacity. So that's 50 positions, approximately 50, give or take a couple. Those numbers fluctuate with the current academy class. At Shaftesbury, our total officer allotment is 15. That does not include me. That's my patrol troopers, to include my 4 sergeants and 11 road troopers. If you count the young troopers currently on FTO and has not graduated that step right now, we are at 12. So we're down 3 from what our TO is, which honestly is the best we've been since I've been the lieutenant in Shaftesbury in October of 2021. We've been hovering at about 10 troopers, maybe 11 occasionally over the last 3.5 years. So if you're thinking about it in math ways, if we're at 10, we're basically at 2/3 our capacity to cover the amount of ground and assist with Bennington and work in some of the other things that we're involved in statewide. So currently we're in a better spot than we were at this time last year, but we are still, given everything we have right now, we are still down 3 total.
Thank you. Paul?
So, Mr. Jingo, I appreciate the question. I really was hoping to get through the night without having to answer that. We are, quite honestly, we should have 27 law enforcement officers, including the lieutenant and I. We currently have 21. We have had actually, in the last month or so, we've had a few people apply. We are putting them through the process. It's very difficult for us here in Vermont. We don't seem to have, and I say Vermont as a whole, we don't seem to have some of the benefits and some of the perks that other states have. Please take your time next time you're down in the Albany, Troy area and drive through Troy and look at all the money that they're putting into billboards and flashing street signs and everything. They're down 80 personnel down there, and they're doing everything that they can to recruit. They're having open testing dates and things. We don't have that opportunity here in Vermont. You collect an application from someone, you screen it, you call the academy, you make arrangements for them to go up for testing. They have to take a psychological exam, they have to take a PT test, and then we decide based on those two things in their application whether we start the real process with them. It takes anywhere from 6 months to a year to get someone out on the road unless we hire someone away from another agency. Quite honestly, I'm opposed to that because it just puts another agency down. We are losing an officer to another agency in a different county here where that officer is going to make more money and do a tenth of the work that he's required to do here in Bennington. And that's not a slap at the face of the other agency. That chief and I, we get along very well, not so much in the last 2 weeks, but the bottom line is that's something that is real. We rob from Peter to pay Paul. We start the academy class. Lieutenant Coote worked there. He'll tell you. I'll tell you right now that the academy class has dropped approximately 10 people since it started just 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago.
A month ago.
They're dropping people left and right, and the standards of the academy are far less than what they were when Lieutenant Coote and I came through. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't reduce our standards on certain things, but we also have to have competent people come out of the academy and have to be ready to work after receiving training. So again, it takes about a full year between the time of the hiring process, going to the academy, the FTO program, and we struggle to make that happen. Erica.
Yeah, the lawyers are no better. We are definitely, I've just recently had another person start, so I have one position that's been open since last summer for an attorney that I haven't been able to fill. We can't compete with some of the other agencies. They just, even some state agencies. Attorney General's office, they make more, they do none of the work that we do, and they spend, all their time is remote. So when, you get asked, do you want to take phone calls in the middle of the night, or do you want to work remote for a tenth of the caseload? It's a no-brainer, and I can't fault people for doing that, but it's not just my office. I'm chair of the executive for the state's attorneys, and every office is dealing with it. We've had a number of state's attorneys that have turned over because the stress and the pressure has been just a lot. And I think being in law enforcement has been more thankless in the last 5 years than I think it's been in my lifetime. So it's been challenging. So it's a tough sell when you're trying to convince people to do this for their career.
I think too, Mr. Jingo, you and I worked together years and years and years and years ago, and maybe someday I'll retire like you, but I have to tell you, I do love this job, and I've looked at what other agencies are doing to try to recruit people, and we try to have a well-balanced budget, and I'm not here because Jeannie Jenkins is in the back and Stewart's to my left. I mean, these folks work really hard at putting together a well-balanced budget. We have other select board members here, Clark and others. We work really hard to put a budget together that's balanced, that we feel that the taxpayers in Bennington can afford. Our shift differential is 85 cents an hour. So from 5 p.m. until 5 a.m., those officers make an extra 85 cents. That's not a lot when you're looking at this officer who's leaving our agency is going to make $3 more an hour because he's going to be working nights. We just simply, we're trying to be balanced, but we know, and Stu and Dan Monks and Cam and I have recently had conversations about what is Bennington going to do to draw more people here that want to work. We're not a Monday through Friday agency. We don't work from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We wish that we could do things like that, but law enforcement is required 24/7, 365 in Bennington and everywhere else around the state of Vermont. And as Erica told you, she takes calls in the middle of the night. My phone rings, Lieutenant Grandy's phone rings, 12:30, 2:30. New York State Police made a traffic stop. We need some help from Bennington. Okay, well, the chief worked that case because we didn't have people to come out and cover, no detectives on the weekend, so the chief worked that case, so the chief gets up at 12:30 in the morning to help the New York State Police. Okay, I signed up for this and I understand that.
Right.
But what I'm sharing with you is that we need to find a way to get more people involved in law enforcement. We need to stop shaming law enforcement. For the most part, 99.9% of law enforcement officers do the right thing every single day. And that's what people in our community, around the state and this country need to understand. So we need to encourage people to be involved in law enforcement now. Years ago, there were 50 or 60 people that applied for one position, and you got to pick the cream of the crop. Now we struggle to get. We have 3 applicants for 6 open positions. And you know what? Hopefully at least one of those people makes it through the process. So.
And I don't want to indict a whole generation, but I've had a number of millennials that I just don't think they know what they want to be when they grow up. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's not generational, but it feels it. I think Paul's right. You sign up for this. I took after-hours calls the day I had a baby. I signed up for this. I try to shield my staff from that existence because they're not going to stick with it.
So in medicine, that's been a dilemma for a long time. We got trained, we did training of residents, and there's an old interview with one of the founding doctors at Mass General Hospital and saying, well, of course, when we started, the surgeons bemoaned that they could only be on call every other night, which meant they were missing 50% of the cases in the OR. But the problem is, as we've looked at it, as we've looked at society, but as we've looked at learning and we looked at job performance, is when people are over-fatigued, injuries, poor decisions, missing details happen. And so I commend all of us for taking calls, because you're all not alone in getting calls in the middle of the night or being called by people outside of our agency, because I give out my cell phone to all of those people too so that they can contact someone. And nobody abuses it because they understand it is a scarce resource, and that you are a scarce resource to each other, which is why you do it. We're in it together. We're in it as a community, and that's what we have to look at. Not that we expect everybody to come in, but they have to come in wanting to build, wanting to be part of the community. We may need to change the jobs a little bit to accommodate that people are not ready to be woken up 3 or 4 times, or 5 or 6 times a month. But maybe we also have to find another way to do it so it's not landing on one person's pocket, because the calls have to be answered, the decisions have to be made, and there have to be competent people in those positions to make those decisions. So it really is a both and.
Yeah, I feel like, though, and I think you guys will probably agree, that it's a mentality. And, whether you're doing social work or, I talk to some of the elementary school teachers when they're struggling with students that they know are not having their needs met, and I don't know how they do their work, because they're spending all day with these children that then they know they're sending them home to an unsafe situation. They don't know how I do my work, because I'm reading autopsies and, awful things every day. And there's not a day that goes by in the last 20 plus years that I don't go once a day. I'm still shocked, like at least once a day. And, I feel like that's something that takes, like I have a personality where I can take the phone call in the middle of the night and then I can go back to sleep. I'm not laying there awake all night, stressed out about it, and I feel like I've had some folks that have worked for me that they're not built for that kind of in-your-face stuff all the time, and, you know, and I'm sure I have a shelf life. I'm sure everybody that does this work does.
May I ask one more question? Erica, would you comment on plea bargaining? What's the percentage of that, and any thoughts that you might be able to share with all of us?
We are so lucky in this county because we have the best working relationship with law enforcement and the public defender's office and the other attorneys that work generally in the county. So we have probably at least 85%. I just was looking at the numbers earlier. We're like number 5 in the state for the number of trials we do every month. And that's not a percentage, that's a number. So we do more trials than most. There are 14 counties in Vermont that do trials every month, and we're like number 5 for how many we do. Chittenden not above us, by the way. We do more trials. So the way I look at it, we're just trying to get to a result that makes sense. We spend a lot of time plea bargaining, but there are so many things that can't really be part of the record or can't be made of the, you know, if I have a case with a 9-year-old child victim, the whole thought process has to go into that about, am I going to bring this 9-year-old in because the defendant has a right to confront their witness? I can try to do protections around that, but it doesn't always work out that way. And sometimes it really is, what's the best way to get an outcome where I'm not going to see this person again? You know, I always hope, what I tell folks is probably 80% of the people that I see in court on any given day are people that have been there repeatedly. Probably only 20% of the people today, we had a big calendar, there were only a handful of people that were not individuals that I have repeatedly dealt with over the years. So, you know, we spend a fair amount of time plea bargaining, and the way I look at it is I'm very cost-benefit about everything. You know, the first and foremost for me is always, if there's a victim, is there restitution? What does the victim want to see happen? You know, what are they going to be able to come in and testify if it comes to that? That's always where I start. And then from there, we're building out. Our Department of Corrections is fabulous. I can call Gina or any of the workers and say, realistically, what do you think is going to be the best outcome here? Sometimes it's jail, sometimes, you know, it's a split sentence. Sometimes I use deferred sentences. That means that they plead guilty to the offense, but we hold off doing a sentence for them until that term is over. And if they complete the term, they have no record, it goes away. That's a great tool for the population that Stu was talking about earlier. I did youthful offender 20 years ago. I kind of made it up, and you probably remember, because I would take someone that I was involved with in juvenile court, and then they would get a criminal case, and they're 18 years old, but we would be able to leverage whatever it was they were doing in their social work in juvenile court and help them build we were building custom programs for everybody. We would look at the kid and say, what do they have for natural supports? What do they need? That's kind of what I do with plea bargaining with all cases. I'm looking at the case. Sometimes I'm talking to the defendant's parents and that's kind of the nice thing of being around so long and like living here and growing up in the community. I can walk down the hall and I know most of the people and their family members or whatever. And Paul and I talk, I'll call Paul and say, hey, I have this case on. We just had a case that my office had taken one approach. Paul had a different perspective. He called me and I was like, that absolutely makes sense to me. And we were trying to figure out how best to address the situation without it being heavy-handed. And it, you know, every day I always say, well, that's not right. Like, that's my kind of internal voice all the time. Like, does this seem right? And I want to make sure that people are heard. So the relationship with the defense attorney is really important, only because if you have a decent negotiating relationship, they'll tell you. You know, one of the cases where I said we had the wrong person charged, I had, and I don't want to take up too much time, but it's like a really funny, one of those things you wouldn't think about. I had a defense attorney say to me, my guy didn't do it. He was charged with stealing a microwave out of a motel room when he left. And he says, my guy didn't do it. He says he bought it at the Salvation Army. I said, oh, why would I believe him? He was a repeat offender. He'd been there multiple times, but I just called Salvation Army just for the hell of it. Hey, do you keep records on small appliances? They did. And he had purchased it. So had I not had a good relationship with the defense attorney, he wouldn't have told me that. He would have played like hide the ball and like shocked me with it at trial, which makes no sense. You know, he trusted me to do the right thing, which is like, wow, he didn't do it. I went in and shook the guy's hand. I'm like, I'm really glad you didn't do this. It's like he actually hadn't been in trouble in a while. So those are what the plea bargain, we get all the information. I hate to call it making sausage, but that's really what it is.
Thank you all for responding to my questions and for what you do in our community.
Thank you.
Other questions? Please. No, Clark, that's you.
Good evening, everyone. Clark Adams, Bennington. There's two things. Every last one of you has a job where people don't come see you because everything's good in their lives. So I understand that 100%, and for that, I salute you. The one area, and I think if I'd be, is Marthage or Erica, if I could be so forward. I think we spoke a while back during the height of the craziness on the streets here.
Yeah.
One of my ongoing concerns is the feds. You know, when I moved up here from Connecticut, and a lot of the ne'er-do-wells who I've been hearing of lately are part of the reason I left Connecticut, because they were shooting up and doing terrible things where I used to live. I'm really not happy with the fact the feds don't seem to be throwing the book at these people. They come up here, you know, in my mind, to correct you, the attorney, you're sitting in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and you're thinking of some criminality. Two of you, that's conspiracy. You're thinking of coming across the border to do it, that's federal conspiracy. You get across the border, you've done it. I just really think we need to insist that the feds go after these people full bore. And I know the chief has a Fed officer here with him, but it just seems to me I'm hearing that consistently. The heinous acts, people being murdered and maimed, and drugs all seem to have border crossing as a common denominator. And I just really am disappointed that more isn't being done to hammer down on these people. And I'm not blaming the chief or the lieutenant. I'm looking north and south.
I think, Clark, you raise a valid point, but I do believe that over the last couple of years, our relationship with our federal partners has increased. Erica's office has to agree to allow, and Erica, correct me if I'm wrong, to take the state case. And we are working some very significant cases right now with our, I can't say too much, but we had an incident here in Bennington at a big box store. Then North Adams PD got involved with the robbery down there at the Walmart. And that led to a pursuit and firearms and all sorts of things happening. And I know that the feds are looking at that case so we can combine the Bennington case and the Massachusetts North Adams case. There was just a several-day trial that our people were involved in, state police and Bennington police, federal trial with a person that made a bomb. And that bomb was going to be used on Depot Street here in Bennington, potentially whack a few people and hurt innocent survivors at the same, or innocent civilians at the same time. They survived that because of the abilities of the Vermont State Police and the Bennington Police and our federal partners that came together, and that trial went very smoothly. That person's been convicted. And so there are things that, we don't always hear, Clark, unfortunately, what happens with the federal cases because the banner folks in Channel 10 and Channel 13, they find their way to the Bennington courthouse. They don't always follow the media releases that are coming out of Burlington. We all know when there's a change of presidents, our U.S. attorneys, they either resign or they're fired, and all this other stuff. So, there's a change right now going on, and we're trying to keep that relationship going with the federal partners that we've been building over the last couple of years. So we are using federal prosecution in some cases, and they do normally receive significant time.
So I can speak to that. The real issue is, as Paul said, a lot of the cases, sometimes law enforcement doesn't necessarily see it as a federal offense right away. I look at it and think, or I have a deputy that does a lot of these cases that we speak with the federal prosecutors quite a bit. Where I become hesitant, and Paul he remembers this because it was probably a little more than 10 years ago, I was not giving the feds the local drug cases that could be prosecuted federally, because they were taking my local federal or my local defendant and then trading his prosecution for information to arrest some drug dealer in New York City.
Sure,
not that I don't care about New York City, but I want Bennington to be the unattractive place to deal drugs. They need, so I had a conversation with a couple of the U.S. attorneys in a row where I said, I'm not giving you cases anymore because you're selling them for a song, and then the person that I worked with them to have arrested is now back in our community. Maybe you arrested somebody down there, but that's not my concern anymore. When I first took office, of course, I wanted to save the world, but now I'm just really focused. The past 10 years, it's been what's going to be best for Bennington. So there have been a handful lately. I can't tell you how valuable it's been when Bennington Police had their federal partner in the office. That was it was like night and day. It used to take me a week to get a response about, hey, do the feds know anything about this guy? And I wouldn't hear.
Well, again, I can appreciate all that. One of, again, as I said, my experience down in Connecticut is with the drug folks. When the Fed stepped in, the locals, again, had the bail issue. The Fed said, no, you're drug dealers. You're using guns.
I do
There is no bail, and when I hear, and I would see they seem to be very young, 91 seems to be their alleyway. And I don't understand, why these people are being sent home to their grandparents.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I had very early on, and Paul probably remembers it, I ended up hanging up on one of the assistant U.S. attorneys because he told me
I know.
he was not going to take, I had a 19-year-old who had brought an unbelievable amount of drugs in our community and had guns and everything else, and we had no place to put him. Under our law at the time, I had to charge him in juvenile court. And so I said, you guys have to take this. And he gave me a whole bunch of attitude about he was not in the business of picking up our slack, and I lost my patience with him. And
well, thank you.
Did he hang up on me, or I don't remember, but Paul heard about it.
And Clark, I think this is important for people in the community to hear. Not only do we have federal partners, I can have the FBI here in 45 minutes. I can have Homeland Security here out of Boston with an amazing team in 3 hours. I have 2 TFOs, we call them task force officers, that are fully trained and recognized by federal agencies as federal partners partners. They can cross state lines. They can go to New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Maine, wherever they want to go, and we can all work cases together. Again, called task force officers. So these are all things that we've advanced on. The state police have had task force officers for years. This to us in the last 3 or 4 years is new to us, but it works for us. And they take our cases and they prosecute them federally because we've had the training that we need to put together federal cases. So I think it's important that you know that. I mean, we can call ATF and have ATF here, and they'll work with us and do the things that we need to do. We haven't always had this partnership, but I think we have an amazing partnership now, and we've had to build that. It's like Legos, right? You build it, and then hopefully it doesn't break apart when somebody else gets involved.
Right.
And I think you know what I mean with that.
Sure,
So that's a great question, Clark. I'm glad that you asked it, but we are working closely with our federal partners now, and we have task force officers.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for all you do, and, I used to take call, I know what you're saying.
Other questions? Please come up. Whoever wants to come. I'm not going to choose you.
Hi, I'm Jean Connor, Bennington. When you were speaking earlier about there's no place to put a juvenile offender, it triggered my memory to a time, it was 43 years ago, I did the math. I was doing my student teaching in a state hospital, residential hospital for mentally ill children. And while I was there was, I think the boy was around 9. It was an emergency admission in the middle of the night. He had killed his father. He was 9. That's an extreme case, and I know that's not the kind of scenario you were talking about, but can you give us a sense of if it was a 15-year-old in Vermont that did such a thing, and when there's no place to put them, what's the process? What would happen in a case like that? I'm going to sit down.
So the first thing we would do, the law enforcement we would be consulting with UCS to determine if this is a juvenile that needs crisis placement. So for us, that would be the retreat or, maybe a crisis bed someplace else. But if it's not a mental health, I have no options right now. Because Woodside closed, my only option is to charge that juvenile as an adult, and the jail would be responsible for housing him, likely in a hotel room, but maybe in a segregated unit. All options are bad, the way it is now.
When a mental health assessment has been made, usually in that kind of a case, they'll have been brought to the emergency room. And that's one of the reasons why we work closely with SVMC to redesign their emergency room so that they can separate off children from adults as necessary for safety purposes. And those are locked rooms so that they are kept safe from other people trying to harm them or from them harming themselves by running out. So then there's a process. And in this state, when a juvenile is needing mental health treatment, it can be anywhere from half a day to a day to 2 weeks to get an inpatient bed, depending on how other people have to leave for another person to come and occupy a bed.
We had a youth that was in the placement at the hospital for more than a month.
Yeah.
In a locked room with no windows.
And I think it's important that you understand, not that I don't have sympathy for this child who may have mental health issues, it really is something that is a strain on law enforcement because, we have sat on juveniles for 2 weeks at a time, 24/7, at Southwest Vermont Medical Center. And if, as a law enforcement agency with limited resources at this time, it's very difficult to have our resources tied up at the emergency room. But again, it's life safety. We also have to protect the staff at the hospital. We're not corrections officers. What Erica was talking about earlier with placing juveniles in hotel rooms, and you had two corrections officers in that room with them, that's not the answer either. We really need a juvenile detention facility back in Vermont, whether it's 10 beds, 12 beds, 15 beds. We don't need to build a monstrosity of a building. We are, and I don't want to upset anybody, but we are certainly, we're looking at unhoused individuals and helping them, which I think is much needed, but we also need to do something that's going to protect the safety of the communities in Vermont, and we definitely need a juvenile detention facility that's much needed here in this state. So I know we've talked about that a lot tonight, and Gene, that really is something that is needed. And I know you're talking about something 43 years ago, but we have heinous crimes committed by juveniles in this state, and there needs to be a way to hold them accountable and keep them safe as well. So some of these locked rooms that we're talking about are needed until we can find placement. We had not all that long ago, we had a juvenile, I think it was Lieutenant Grandy and I drove the juvenile over to Brattleboro Retreat, and that juvenile had spent over 2 weeks in the emergency room here in Bennington, and you wonder why they get frustrated and they throw their food and they slam their trays and they assault nurses and things like that. It's just extremely frustrating. This one went so far as to assault a deputy sheriff, and law enforcement officers don't like to be assaulted either. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Hi, I'm Scott Frost from Bennington. I just had a quick question. If we could reallocate our rehab resources into the prisons, would that make it easier to incarcerate violent, addicted offenders?
Scott, I think that's a great question. I think that's something that we, in a next forum, when we have somebody here from corrections like Gina Kondo, or we're fortunate enough to get the superintendent down here. I mean, corrections does spend a lot of money on rehabilitation and trying to get people to participate in their programs. And but I think that's, I know I personally can't answer that question. I think that's somebody from corrections that would have to answer that. Steve, what do you think? Okay.
Yeah, and I think added to that is, even when you have the treatment in the facilities, if you're really doing rehab, you need a very strong community system to receive them. One of the problems we've seen in mental health and intellectual disabilities is deinstitutionalization without a strong community program, so people are falling between the cracks. And it's bad when people are jailed without access to mental health treatment, and we've gotten better at doing that. But we still get, especially in substance use, we pick up people who are being discharged with 2 weeks or 1 month of Suboxone or something like that, or their medications, with no other linkages, nothing else prepared, so that we actually have to bridge them till they can link into other services. It takes 2, 3, 4 months to link into all of those services. It takes longer to get a primary care. It takes longer to get housing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Jackie Matz, Bennington. First, thank you. This has been incredibly informative. Thank you for being here. Thank you for organizing this. In talking about like a lot of the challenges that you've faced sort of addressing some of these situations, I know that you're often, most of you, seeing some folks at sort of the lowest points in their lives, and you've described a lot of the challenges to addressing some of these violent crimes, things of that nature. I can also understand folks that are feeling really frustrated at seeing these situations on their own streets I know that we can't be condoning vigilantism, but I wonder if you can talk about some of the things that maybe folks can do. I know that you've talked about contacting legislatures. Somebody mentioned the See Something, Say Something program. Are those the only actions that you can suggest that folks sitting at home feeling frustrated, sort of saying to themselves, well, if nobody else can deal with these issues, then I have to do something. So what can folks do? If those are the only things, maybe you could talk a little more about See Something, Say Something, how that works?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, Jackie, we do have, state police have a tip line, we have a tip line. You can certainly, type your concerns. It just doesn't have to be a couple of sentences. You can go into great detail. I can share with you that at the Bennington Police Department, just as an example, those tips go to the lieutenant and I, and then we look at them and we disseminate them to whichever agency that they need to go to, or with our own agency. We do get tips from the Vermont State Police as well. On an occasion, we'll get a federal tip also that will come over from the FBI or what have you. I think that for us, in law enforcement, we ask that people, you can collect data for us. If you're in a neighborhood where you're seeing a lot of traffic at your neighbor's house and it's only a couple minutes and you see, and I don't want to pick on anybody being from Connecticut or whatever, Mr. Hurd, but if you see, a Connecticut registered car pull up and they're there for a couple hours and a backpack goes in and next thing you know, all the traffic's coming, that's a clue to law enforcement, right? And all we're asking is that you collect data and you can send that data to us. You don't have to include your name. You can be anonymous. As Erica said, we do prefer to talk to people. But if we can't talk to you, that's perfectly fine. Give us the information so that we can build a case. That's what a lot of people don't understand, is that, just because you send us a tip doesn't mean, bam, we're going to get our SWAT van and roll out and we're going to kick somebody's door in and throw everybody on the ground, because that's not how it works anymore, right? So, but we're going to build a case, a solid case, so that the prosecution is solid. And I think that's what people need to realize. A lot of people think that this is what you see on Cops or what you see on NCIS, where they solve murders in less than 40 minutes, minus the commercials, right? So the bottom line is that these are things that we have to think about. Give the police the information, let us build the case, and when we're in your neighborhood, come out and clap. We get a lot of that. We get a lot of people applauding us, whether it's with the state police or the sheriff's department or what have you. People, listen, we work cases with DCF. We seem to have forgotten DCF tonight. We work cases with them, and people are so happy that we take people's children away that shouldn't have those children, because they're going to get the assistance that they need, right? So there's a lot going on here. But again, collect the data, share the information with law enforcement. Don't be frustrated if you don't see something happen within a couple hours, right? But know that we're building a case and we're taking it very seriously. Share the information that you have. Encourage your neighbors to do the same thing. Share the information with us. That's what's important.
I have a basic request. Everybody, I love Ring cameras.
We love Ring cameras.
They're like Christmas. Like, we have views of streets that there is nothing better than having video evidence of cars coming and going or whatever, and you don't even need to be involved. Like, they get the video and then they give it to me and then I subpoena Ring, and now I have, an actual video piece of evidence. So, that would be, and if anybody ever wants to come to court and clap, that'd be awesome, because I've never had that happen.
But the other thing too, just to remember, is, Steve talked about coming out of the academy and you think you're going to save the world. Your handcuffs are shiny, your badge is shiny, they give you black leather gloves, and you think, oh, now we wear rubber gloves. But the bottom line is that we have all of these things available to us. In the old days, they taught us to canvass the neighborhood. Yes, my name is Trooper Jones, and I would like to know if you saw anything this evening. Hi, my name's Trooper Jones, or my name's Officer Doucette, and I'd like to know if you have any cameras at your house that point out towards the road. Do you have a Ring doorbell? That's what we're asking for. You don't have to even tell us anything, because everything we need is right there. We love Ring cameras, Ring doorbells. Please use them. When we come to your house, we'll give you a thumb drive. All you got to do is download it for us. It's perfect. Or you can email it to us. You can take screenshots and send them to us. We love that.
That's fantastic.
So, Jackie, if I can say, as a citizen who doesn't have a Ring camera, talk to your neighbors. Work with your neighbors. We had a situation in and around our neighborhood where what Paul described was actually taking place. And Our neighbors were aware of it. We were aware of it. There were people writing down plate numbers, calling the PD, indicating what the car make and license plate was, and the PD was able to follow up on that. No, they didn't show up right away and throw
Kick the
bombs
door
and
in.
arrest everybody, but they picked them up several hours later, and they were carrying drugs and doing drug business. So work with your neighbors.
And building on working with neighbors, I think we can encourage everybody to get to know neighbors and especially for people who are in violent situations, who are the victims of violence, and especially when you have children where you are suspecting that they're in an unsafe situation, it's also a matter for the children to realize there are safe people around they can go to. It's very scary to leave somebody who has threatened you with your life if you go to anybody else. And so it takes tremendous courage to leave those situations. So providing the lifelines and then calling 911 is a real boon and a real building of community. So we keep talking about community, but community is all of us. Community is responding to our neighbors and asking whether or not they're safe. Do they have enough food? There's some pretty basic ways that we can reach out that are not revealing all of our personal secrets or paying for everybody's anything, but are just decent kind of interactions that we need.
Fantastic, thank you.
Oh, I just had one quick thing. I think you bring up a great question, and I can't agree more with what's been said about information. Some of the best cases I've seen in my 20 years are not based solely on a good officer, trooper, detective, state's attorney investigating and prosecuting, but from information that we've gathered from folks, whether it's Ring cameras, which I totally agree with. I have 3 at my house. I'm not paid by Ring. But the other piece of the puzzle is, and we talked a little bit about it earlier, is resources are thin for everyone, right? Law enforcement, I shared with you what the TO is for my shifts at Shaftesbury. On a given day, generally speaking, I have 3 troopers for the entire county. So we utilize this data with the state police also for enforcement details, for presence. It's hard for me without data from our community to know where some of those hot spots are. Yes, I can hear it through the grapevine, but if I have data to back that up and we can work with our other partners, whether it's federal, DMV, other law enforcement agencies, for something as simple as, I know we're talking about some drugs and crime stuff, but traffic safety is a big one, right? If we know where some of our roadside fatalities are happening, some of that information is coming from the folks that we're getting in our community, and that's imperative to our success. Without it, I've got, on any shift, really 6 sets of eyes out in our community trying to catch what we need to catch to make our community safer. If we can partner with our community members, in Bennington and outside of it, it really, kind of enhances our force and our ability to interact with the community and make it safer. So it's been very important to me.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, please, come up.
Chris Maxey, Bennington. Erica's not here right now, but
She'll be right back.
my question for Erica, or anybody I suppose, is one of the things that was discussed a few years ago was enforcement of absentee landlords and landlords that continued to house folks that continue to be a nuisance to the public and not doing anything about it. And there was a conversation years ago about perhaps making landlords liable for the continued burden on the taxpayer. And I was wondering what happened with that, or if there was any continuation of that conversation, or what the designs would be like for the future for that.
Until Erica gets back, we have worked with area landlords. We have taken landlords to court, and the word spread very quickly on that. We do get information now from landlords in Bennington about things that are going on, and they want to know if they're off the hook when they provide that information. It doesn't quite work like that. They still have a responsibility to make sure that that community is safe, and sometimes that involves Erica's office sending letters. The other piece of it is, I have to give a shout out to our code enforcement team with the town of Bennington, first names only, Paul and Bridget. They share information with us on a regular basis, and we share information with them about some of the things that are going on. We might not be able to do anything on the law enforcement side, but they can certainly do things on the code enforcement side to bring people into compliance, and if they're not in compliance, then they can move, see ya, don't want to be ya. So there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that people don't realize, and that's a great question, holding landlords accountable.
Sorry, I was trying to wait, but I drank a lot of water. We are still, to date, the only county that has filed a common nuisance case, and that was only because we had hundreds of incidents from the one location, and we filed it, and ultimately, we were lucky in that we were able to get a resolution that resulted in essentially that landlord kind of, the town is able to make sure they're in compliance with not engaging in that kind of activity again. And we got some monetary reimbursement, whether we'll ever see it, I don't know, but it was a landlord that lived in Florida. And I think that sent a strong message. I certainly had, I had a lot of questions from various legislators about how they could hone a statute that would make that more doable. I have had the attorneys in Chittenden request, like, how did you do that? Can you do that? You know, can we do that? And I was like, you have no idea the amount of work that went into that, but it was completely, I mean, we had documents like this thick, but it was worth it because I think it sent a very clear message that the town of Bennington is not where this is going to happen. And honestly, what got me over the hump on even doing that was the woman who lived in the building that was completely law-abiding. I think she was older. She had complained to the landlord repeatedly about all she wanted to do was go to work, have an apartment, not be living in a drug house. And that just irked me like beyond, because I was like, this poor lady is working and just trying to go about her life, and her landlord is completely ignoring the fact that this is happening. So I was thrilled that we were able to do that. Is it something we're going to be able to do in every case? Definitely not. Just because it was a stretch to begin with, and they had so much investigation into it.
But to be perfectly clear, we see it here in Bennington. Landlords are calling with information. They get information from their tenants. They share it with the police because they don't want to be that landlord. They make if we produce the proper paperwork, they make keys available so we're not taking doors off hinges and things like that. Because we don't pay for that, folks. Taxpayers don't pay for that. The landlords are paying for that damage. And when we're taking a $400 door off the hinges, not my problem. You knew this problem was existing, you did nothing about it. And you know, we don't purposely break doors. We do take keys. We make, you know, we make do with what we're provided. But we do have a lot of cooperative landlords now, for sure, as a result of that case. So, you know, and we appreciate it. We get a lot of information from landlords, and we appreciate the fact that, you know, we have that working relationship. So.
Thank you. And we're going to wrap up our forum now. We've gone a little bit over. Thank you to Cat TV, and thank you to all of our panelists that are here this evening, as well as everybody that came tonight and everyone who is watching online. We will ask that the attendees here fill out the evaluation form that we handed out with the pamphlet. That will help CPARB with our future planning processes. And we are are hoping to have future events. We will continue to have small listening sessions around the community, so if anyone is part of an organization or would like to reach out and have CPARB come and do a small listening session, these are informal sessions that we do with just maybe 2 or 3 members of CPARB so that we don't have a quorum. We don't have cameras there. It's all very informal. We bring the information back to the Bennington Police Department, and we also discuss it in our meetings. So if anybody is interested in that, please reach out to me, Kelly Carroll, or Kate Cost, and we can work on setting that up. And we do hope to have a second public safety forum, possibly in the fall, that may focus on sentences. And if anybody does have a question, feel free to go to our website, on the town's website, and submit a question, and we'll do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible. And then lastly, just as a reminder, CPARB does have their bi-monthly meeting tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock in this very room, so feel free to come back and join us tomorrow. Thank you again, and have a wonderful evening.
Remember to get out and vote March 4th. Get out and vote March 4th.